Welcome to the Agile Wire. Brought to you by Wisconsin Agility. We want you to get agile and stay agile. Now here are your hosts, Jeff Bubolz and Chad Beier. And we're recording. All right, kick us off, Jeff.
All right, so we have Troy Magennis joining us again on the podcast. It's been a while since we've had Troy. Back in 2022, so it's been a couple years. Troy's well known in the Agile community for everything data and math within the Agile community. So we're happy to have Troy on. Troy, you've been doing a lot of space or a lot of things inside of the AI space around AI strategy. So I don't know, how have you married the data component that you're so well known for with AI here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, traditionally, analytics was sort of numerical based, and where we really struggled was where anytime text was involved, analytics went downhill very fast. We'll put a word cloud in, or we'll do something like that, right? And I think what LLMs and AI has sort of added is this sort of textual sort of based analytics, for want of a better word, because it can summarize, it can aggregate, and it can do that no matter the language or no matter how poorly the person expresses what they meant. So when you think about sort of our agile world, what do we do in analytics as in teams to try and understand sort of how we're going? We have a daily stand-up and we sort of talk about what we did yesterday and what we're going to do potentially today, and who's screwing us over now, and that sort of stuff, and then we take actions based on that information. Now that was always beyond any chart. Like on a cycle time plot, you might try and change the color of a dot to sort of say it's blocked. Someone's not working on something we expected. But I think with AI, what I'm finding is the fact that we can write summaries and summarize what's happening, and then sort of have it suggest where time's best spent. And it's certainly not going to get it perfect, but it's certainly going to be better than not doing it at all. And I think it's another sort of realm of data and analytics that was currently beyond reach before, GPT-3.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. We've been using AI a lot, almost just like a personal assistant. But my most recent experience from a flow standpoint and asking it for assistance, I have elementary school kids, and there's a school drop-off line, and it's the classic traffic example where there's enough room for 5 or 6 cars to have all the children get out at once together in a batch of 5 or 6. And then everyone drive away, and the line just moves right well. But what everyone does in the winter in Wisconsin here is it's cold, and so nobody wants to get out of the car and have a little extra walk. So it's single drop off. One car lets a kid out, and then everyone waits, and then they pull forward, and the line just backs up. Yeah. So I asked ChatGPT, hey, can you solve this problem for me? I kind of knew, there's an optimal batch size, but, yes. What is it? So I kind of gave it the constraints of, this is how many feet we have for the drop-off area. And it, gave me this really nice summary. And then I actually asked it, could you write me an email to send to my school district to see if they would, act on this? Of course, I did all that. It was a great email, I thought. Sent it. Nobody really cared.
Yeah, it's like the gym.
Cool.
Everyone wants to be right up front. No one wants to have to walk an extra across the parking lot to get into the gym. They've got to park by the front door. But yeah, it's good at expressing things. You and I probably would have written a more aggressive email sort of saying, this is stupid. Do you understand how inefficient this is, you idiots? And ChatGPT can change the audience and have a higher chance of success. For example, one of the things I did, one of the products I have is it tracks what's blocked, because I truly believe that if we can sort of understand the causes of why prior work was blocked, we might be able to stop future work being blocked in a similar way, right? But it's sort of pretty dry, negative stuff, we're blocked on legal because the privacy agreement, but to spice it up, what I found was I made it come out in Australian slang or John Cleese or something sort of funny and get it to summarize it, and the engagement went up, 100-fold. It's just like having a comedian in your stand-up, sort of someone all of a sudden people want to come to the stand up to try and look at the sort of the floor show. And I think that's sort of where the language and the intent of what you want to say can be adaptable to who you want. I mean, even obvious sort of changes. Put the status report in Spanish. Put the status report in German, because most of our team is in Germany. So it doesn't matter how the original story or work was written, what language it was written in. It can be re-expressed in with less grammatical errors than I have, and in the language of choice of the person that they want. And I think that, again, so how does that relate to data? Well, data is about people understanding and interpreting things. And anything that gets in the way of them understanding or interpreting is a bad day as far as data visualization goes. And I think what GPT-4 can help us do is re-express the boring, dry data we have. And like normally I would like to do it in a nice, pretty chart, but it can re-express the data we have in textual way in a much more compelling textual way that humans like to interact with, apparently, I'm told.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I use often, the pattern is like, explain this concept to me like I'm in 6th grade. And then sometimes I go down to 4th grade or 3rd grade. Like, and it's just interesting how it can explain pretty complex issues, topics, for us to understand, right? And we don't have to be, we don't all have to have several years of education behind that topic to grasp it in that way. So I don't know. Yeah. It just feels like it's making us way more efficient in certain ways. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure, I mean, if we look at how it's sort of affecting the developer world, and I guess, like the way I like to sort of think about these things is on continuums, right? So, I mean, we have new developers. And what do new developers sort of typically do? They tend to copy and replicate what's currently in our code again and again and again. And then normally someone might cast their eye over it with a bit more detail than they would anyone else. Well, we could sort of can see the AI coding assistants probably will rapidly improve how fast those people are on board, to a degree that we probably don't really need that many people of that skill level, right? And you got the medium level people, which can sort of solve defects, and they understand sort of how to start off from nothing and maybe create a form and do the research to do that. And then you got the high end. And I think what the high-end people do is understand the blast radius of any change, both on product and customer, and they're consolidating a lot more things that could go wrong. Well, I think the same with GPT, LLM sort of usage and coding assistant usage sort of is very high for the beginners and very low for the sort of advanced sort of people, because it doesn't understand it only understands the context that you give it. And what really advanced developers do is invent context that you hadn't even thought of. And that's the difference between those sort of two levels. So how do our tools sort of help us support that? I mean, like what's going to happen for LLMs and coding assistants to be used with vigor? If it eliminates all the juniors, then we never end up with any seniors.
Right.
How's that going to work out for us in the future? Because maybe it's that journey of failing millions of times, off by one error, still, still in my 50s and I'm still off by one. So some people learn faster than I, but like the AI assistants will probably start getting a little bit better at helping those advanced developers, but can it ever really know stuff that it doesn't yet know it needs to know? And I'm not sure that problem is truly solvable, given that even our human LLM sort of brains haven't really solved that yet. We still put out production releases which fail, which is a sign that, well, we didn't get that right, right? So, anyone who's sort of used the LLM's coding assistant sort of continuously sort of know that it just changes the type of defect you get. And it makes you start fast, but I think you do hit a barrier there where where you're fixing defects and a new type of defects, you know. So there's a new type of defects that the LLM is giving you. So I think that's what's happening there. So what data do we need? How do we help people get through that? That's the stuff I've been thinking about over the last 12 months because there's nothing else to do in the agile world.
One that I've been playing with, it's called Lovable.ai.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that one works is like you can, like I did this the other day, just it was an experiment. I took something we use in one of our classes. It's like a 3x3 like vision statement of this product, this fake product, put it in there. And it said, create me this product. And it actually did a pretty good job. But I mean, it was not very many features. Like it wasn't very robust. It was like, but it was a starting point. And then I could be like, oh, I want to have email reminders. And then it didn't hit it, but I had a really good cadence. It didn't have those options. So I'm like, add this, add that. But it was like, I could just tell it what to do and it did it. Like I didn't have to code it. I just give it prompts and all of a sudden it's like, there's code in the background. There's TypeScript and React being written. And it's like, this app works.
Yeah.
And it's pretty awesome. Like that's where we are already with this, where you can just basically tell it like a product owner, like this is what I want it to do. And this is how I want it to work. And then it's going to do some things and then it's not going to be able to do some things. And you're going to have to get in there and code the advanced stuff or integrate something or do whatever else. But like, it can just take a lot of the, I don't know, like the stuff you were talking about before, where you're like rewriting the code. Like it's the same code we've always written. It's this field, it's that field, whatever. It can do that for you really, really fast. And but it's not only going to do it in its context or what it's done before, so you're not going to get a lot of innovation either, probably from it.
Well, that's where I sort of started with this sort of stuff. I was thinking then what sort of tools needed in the future, given that we had the power to develop the wrong stuff faster. and I think it's something to help us not develop the wrong stuff. And so I think you're right. I mean, the product owners, the product managers, those sort of people are now probably going to be talking to an LLM at some part of that development sort of side of it. So I sort of set off on the strategy side. How do I help people choose what work to start based on the outcomes they want to achieve, and give them options, ideas, hypotheses, experiments to run on that. Yeah. And then, so what I found with that is that there was always a case to do something and a case not to do something. So the way I sort of drive the LLM in that product is it sort of tells you this should be the number one thing you work on because of, and this should be the last thing you even consider because of. So it's the giving people both sides of the story helps them sort of interpret and understand roughly where the value sort of exists. So because it feels like you should just ask it, prioritize this set of features to optimize the value, but it's a bit harder than that. And I see some of the we're being recorded, so I got to be careful here. Some of the naive implementations of LLMs in some of the products that we have, what can they do for us? The low hanging fruit is, well, rewrite the story so it's legible, or do summarize this sort of set of work, that sort of stuff. So that sort of summarization stuff. But I think the real goal is to, if we look at our tool sets as being just a collection of context, we've got the code, which is context, and then the work that we want to do and have done as context. And then there's something missing, which is why we want to do it. So I've tried to build the tool which gives you the why we want to do it context. I think with those three, LLM tools could make a huge inroads into developing the right products faster, not just developing a product faster. So that's the way I would like to see our industry head, is the fact that we it's always, data is always about what's missing. And we always look at just sort of taking what's there and doing something with it. But the more data visualization you do, the more you realize it's the things that aren't measured that should be, that matter and give you the biggest insights. And I think the same thing with context for these LLMs. And I think that's strategy and outcomes that we want. And that's, the tools are behind on that.
to make that real, like help me understand how your tool works. So like, are you feeding it like user data tools? Like we're an e-commerce site and it's like, here's the flow of like how somebody goes through our application and checks out and does whatever else. And you're like, I need to increase sales in the next quarter by 10%. Can you give me some strategies that might help me do this? And then is it going to be like, well, it looks like your shopping cart abandonment rate at this step is at this percentage. And it might be, and if we can reduce that, we might be able to capture that sales number that you're looking for. Okay.
And what you just expressed was something, what the strategy people call an obstacle. So you got where you are and where you want to be, and there's something between you, right? And the best way of capturing OKRs that I've found that are actionable is to have a sort of a longer term goal that you want to achieve, and it's got to be something more vivid than we want to make money and we want to stop our competitors making money. It's got to be something that, like, in 5 years we want car ownership to be optional because it'd be so convenient just to hail a car from your smartphone, right? Think of random examples like that. Okay. And now you sort of sit down and sort of say, well, what's between us now of car ownership being almost universally mandatory, especially in the US, right? I mean, you don't own a car? What's wrong with you? Have you got DUIs? Why don't you have a car? So, to sort of saying, well, it's just more, I only use a car occasionally, and when I do, it's cheaper to just have someone else drive me. What's between that, point A and point B, and those obstacles are critical for it. So given the set of obstacles, now you can sort of saying, well, what experiments can I do to see if this obstacle is real? If people really see the world and the obstacle the same way as I do it, I need a car because I might, need to get groceries. What if groceries were delivered, right? That you got to do that as experiments. So I use the LLMs to get you to the quickest point to identify the challenges that you have, the obstacles that you have, and then from there take it away and suggest 10 things that you may not have thought of. And it took some time, but what happens now is 3 or 4 of them are obvious, and people say, yeah, I got that. Whoa, didn't think of that. Yeah, that's interesting. And if we're using LLMs to just take control, I think that's wrong. But if we're using it to expand what we're thinking about based on a broader set of context and expertise, then I think we're on the right path. And I think that's exactly what happens with companies which do strategy well versus do strategy poor. Companies that do strategy poorly hand down, this is the set of things that you need to do. They don't say why, and they don't say what they expect them to change, and they don't say exactly what challenge they're solving. It's sort of, some companies help you interpret it, but once a year, they just give you that list of things to do. So that's now, where do we want to be? We want to be where there's a case where we're obviously considered many, many ways of achieving something, and it sort of suggests a prompt that tells your coding tool to write it for you, right? And it's just sort of done. And then what it can do with what we never do is then sort of say, that didn't really work. I didn't see the outcome move like you expected it to. And then we're off to the races, right? And that sort of continuous loop is what sort of I call continuous adaptive strategy. I think is the winning play. I think is that the faster we can iterate around that strategy loop, with the feedback from whether what we did mattered the way we intended, the better our strategy will become in the future. And, I do a lot of stuff on Monte Carlo, which is a fancy way of sort of saying, before you do it, let me do it 1,000 times and sort of tell you what possibly could happen. I think LLMs can do that with strategy faster than we can. They can play out 100 different sort of orders of features and delivery ideas and hypothesize about what the income or the pros and cons would be from that. And that's something that we can do, but we do it a bit slower. We're drunk half the time.
It's interesting. So you've made a comment about the state of Agile and Agile industry and what's happening right now with Agile consulting, and it just feels like it's that age old, like Agile is dead again. Like every few years, somebody's like Agile is dead, and I find it interesting you mentioned strategy and continuously adaptive strategy, because Jeff and I, for years, and of course, we've been influenced over the last decade of our consulting together by many people, right? One that jumps out is Stephen Denning. He wrote his book, The Age of Agile, and he I think that was the first time that we saw this differentiation between operational agility and strategic agility. And everybody wants strategic agility. They want this organization that is so adaptive that it can just respond to whatever's around it, right? But they forget that they have to go through and do some of the basics, right?
Yeah.
Before they can do that. But they want to start there. And what you just said about AI's role in this, I think is going to be interesting, because maybe we will be able to kickstart that a little bit faster for some clients, for some people, instead of just this slow, like, yes, we want to do that, but it takes 6 to 12 months for us to change our org chart.
Or like to build our product, it's really 50 specialties. And so there's no way we could get a group of 10 to 15 people that could actually deliver something of value. Right. And then you're like, well, with AI, you can. You don't have to be an expert at everything. Like the AI can be the expert on the very minute, very technical details, right? So,
and I think it is, and that's what they're finding in the academic world, right? Is that whereas we traditionally sort of had specialists in one certain area, and we gave them a specific title to make sure that they never got out of that, right? You're a doctor in this, you're a doctor in that, right? Or a master's in this, a master's in that. I think what LLMs are proving, O3 and so forth, is the fact that they can have pretty high level expertise across all of things. So the connections they make, we've designed out of humanity and society, right? By design, And I think the same thing happens with our teams. When we're org structure in teams was all about sort of keeping context of what a certain facet was in a certain area, and your LLMs are going to not have that restriction. So we've got we don't just have a T section sort of developer, a T-shaped developer anymore. We have, hyphen-shaped developer. I don't know what we're going to call it, right? But they're good at everything. But they're not the peak of the T, but they're halfway up. So they're a hyphen-shaped developer where they can do everything across the whole organization, especially if you're giving it examples. And then there's just a few things which no one in the world has ever done before, no one in the company has ever done before. And now we might need to prime that with some help. But I think that'll lessen over time. And, I think that's sort of where we're sort of heading us up. But as far as Agile being dead goes, I mean, this is the second sort of level of this sort of stuff. And I say it sort of semi in jest, but, I come out of the electronics industry where we used to have all these industry associations to go from sort of through-hole pin components to surface mount components that sort of solder on the surface rather than have pins going through the board. And there was all the surface mount and circuit board associations, and everyone was retraining up on how to sort of design and rework and fix that sort of type of technology. And then it just become the way it works. There wasn't any other way. And I think some of the developer practices have, like, I can't imagine and it's even hard for a lot of listeners probably on this to even envision, because they never lived it in the 70s and the 80s, right? But I don't think we're going to go back to spending a year writing a 1,000-page specification document.
Nope.
And then hire the developers, and then fire the developers and hire the testers. That's not going to happen anymore, right? And so I think that side of what's coming into organizations now is just anticipating working on some sprint-based cadence of regular delivery. It's not going to be any other way. So I think that side of Agile is dead. Now, you can still do that poorly or well, and I think that's where the consultants sort of help. But I think people wanting to come in and transform an organization from writing specifications to working in an iteratively based way, see, I can't even say it now, is going to lessen. But so now that's where my view is that we actually have to come up with a way of helping people set direction and choose a future they want to solve faster and better. And I think, that's not going to go away. And I don't think that's outsourceable to an LLM. I think it can be assisted by an LLM so you can do it faster and better. But I don't think, given that we're solving human problems, a lot of software is about solving human problems. The amount of empathy that an LLM would have to understand pain as well as a human understands pain is low. Sorry, it just yeah. Yeah. So I think that's my view on that.
Yeah. Now I figured if I teed you up with an Agile is dead comment, I might get you to say something.
Yeah, I mean, do I think companies will wholesale hire transformations? I don't. But I think that there's got to be an era. Here we go. Here's your slogan. There's got to be an era past Jira, and I'm thinking that it was designed for the world which is no longer going to exist in the future, which was micromanaging individual teams and people and what they're doing, right? So how does Agile adapt to solve next year's problems where we have these LLMs and the ability to move really fast, given Jeff at the speed of Jeff's prompting, and I think that that's going to require a very different tool set and view. So I think the only thing really holding the industry back is the tooling that we're currently tied to, and I think that has to change.
I think there's also a lot of structures and organizations that hold us back from taking that, right? So I think there's an opportunity right now where a lot of people have put Scrum or anything Agile over top of existing departments. Those departments are specialized into something very specialized. And if you do more of a product operating model where it's like I'm lining around a product and I have these LLMs that are there to assist us with the skill set gaps that we might have, I think that we can get there a lot faster. And then we're just producing more and more value. And then it's like, what do we do with all these extra people? I don't know. Like maybe we build more products, maybe we do other things. I'm not sure, but like that's a different problem. It's a secondary problem. The first problem is like, how do we accelerate the point of value and accelerate our learning? And I think that LLMs with the product operating model is probably where we're going into the next year or two. I think that's where Agile's going.
I think it's true, but think about it. Like when companies start off, you normally have 3 or 4 or 5 sort of companies competing, and then eventually one takes off and breaks through and becomes the default. The Xerox, the known, they take over the whole field, right? And I think the companies which get the LLM strategy right are going to eliminate their competition faster than ever before. Sure. And remember, the people who are making those decisions about those old structures are people my age, and we're dying off, right? So I don't think that there's I think there's a new generation coming through who won't be encumbered by the sins of the past that we had of having to maintain our fiefdoms. Otherwise, we can't make our house rate payments. So yeah, I think that there's things like that going on. So I think one thing that LLM will do is cause a lot of companies to go under much faster, and for a few companies to become the leaders in their industry segment much quicker.
At the same time, it democratizes skill sets, and so you don't have to have them all, and so it doesn't take as much to innovate inside of a space. Like you don't need billions of dollars of capital anymore. Maybe a few $100,000, and somebody over here with a group of people that understands this, that's done this at like this company that won over here, can spin up something in between these two marketplaces and find a great niche that wouldn't have existed before. So I think everything's changing, but it's just changing faster probably than it's ever been before.
And to take us back full circle, I mean, if we go back to the analytics and the data world, the big breakthrough there was the fact that having data go to data specialists was okay, and you ended up with a chart. But giving the specialists in a field of engineering like biology or medicine or anything like that, giving them the ability to do their own data visualization and analytics was huge. All right. So I think that's what LLMs are doing in our world. We're moving it across to the product owner who can drive it with a comprehension and understanding of the market context better than just trying to write that down and hand it down to a developer who can code it. And I think that's the inflection point we're at.
Yep.
Is the fact that we're now giving the people who have expertise in a domain the ability to write code to solve a problem that really matters. So the people who lose out on that are the people who were trying to start out and just code without any context. And I think that's we're going to have to work on what we do with those people.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think for the future, to make yourself employable in the future, obviously you can't ignore this, right? But I feel like there's some combination of like, you have some level of interest in a field. I don't know how far that specialization goes with education, but there's interest in a field. For example, legal, tax accounting, computer programming. And then when you take that critical thinking and experience you have in that field and you combine it with an AI assistant that you can feed prompts and also be critical of the prompts you get and the answers you get back from it, you can really be hyper productive. Yeah. But if you don't have any knowledge of that, and I go ask ChatGPT to give me all my tax advice for the year, it will give me some bad answers if I don't follow up with critical questions. So I think there's just this still pursue interests, right? But then utilize what's available and what will be available, because again, Jeff and I were saying, like, is Moore's law even like relevant anymore, or is it just relevant as ever because this is just exponentially growing so fast? Like, what's happening? Like, even a year ago, everyone was telling us it's happening so fast, and I was kind of like on the sidelines, like, is it though? And now a year later, I'm like blown away because I experienced firsthand, like, feeding just asking for things to be created from a computer programmer mindset, knowing how I would have done it manually, and it's just incredible. Like, and there's so many things that I haven't even been exposed to and haven't discovered, but I know that they're out there. So the pace is crazy, and I think you just have to embrace it, and then pursue the things you're interested in, and utilize technology, critical thinking, and to excel in that.
Yeah. Get interested in something. I mean, you look at the people who, like, there's a lot of companies in Silicon Valley where people didn't even make it through their original degree. You know, they left early. Like, oh my God, this is. They got motivated about a problem they were solving, and they went out and did it. Damn it! And I think that's. I think all developers have to sort of have a bit of that fire in when they're studying and doing this work. So become a product owner of your own hobby project. Just start sort of flexing and learning the muscles that are required to take an idea and turn it into something that people may buy, and you just may hit on something. I haven't, but I've heard it happen, and that it sort of is out there.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so. Like with the Agile is dead stuff, I don't know. We've always laughed at that over the years, because it's like Jeff and I joke about, like, why do we do what we do? What are we passionate about, really? And it's like, it's really just solving problems inside of organizations and knowing that there's a better way to do things. So improving, right? Yeah. And it's the same reason I will sit every day I make an egg omelet. I'm analyzing the optimal flow for, like, when do I get the ingredients all prepped and, like, the temperature of the range, because I'm just trying to make it as smooth as possible. So when my omelet's done, it cools for 30 seconds, my coffee's done, and I'm eating breakfast. And I don't know what inside of me drives me to have that desire for improvement, but I think that's, whether you call something Agile or not, has nothing to do with that. Like, if anything, Jeff and I are really just organizational improvement consultants.
Yeah, we put a
give
label
people
on
advice,
we put
and
a
it
label.
should help them.
We put a label on it because it could sell, right? And think about it. I mean, so I think Agile is just not dead. It's just now the only thing that's alive, right? But I think, would we go into an organization now and say there were 10 new hires, and we sat down and do we really have to explain to them what Agile is anymore? And I think that sort of went from, if we look at the 2005, it was pretty high. In 2025, I think the chance of anyone in that room not having heard of the word agile or having heard of the word scrum or having worked interned at a company which didn't do those things is very, very low. And I think that part of that sort of base level training, I think, is probably dead, right? But the level above that is, Agile was more about continuous improvement. So let's talk about how you sort of keep the flywheel rolling on getting things moving better and faster. That's ever present. That's never going to be wrong, because now we're sort of what's the improvement process now? How can we use the LLMs better to improve our outcomes? And that's equally as a valid type thing. But yeah, I mean, I think basic certification is probably not a growth market. Let me say that, right? But I think critical thinking and improvement and understanding how to structure to maximize the use of the staff you have and need to have is still huge. So yeah.
Yep.
I don't think you can just, because Agile was never one thing, and I think we conflate it all the time.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Is there anything else you want to plug in your other personal stuff? Like, how do people find your tool that you've been working on that you've been mentioning?
You could go to heycasey.io, HEYCASEY.io, and we try to show that off. And it's a strategy and it's sort of unit test for organizational design. So it takes anything you've done about your strategy and the impediments that have occurred and dependencies and sort of spits out, you should hire 6 more people in this area or do X, that sort of stuff. And then we showed that off to a few people and they all hated it. But they sort of said, this bit of this LLM integration bit's really cool. So we split that out, and that's llmasaservice.io. So that helps if you want to build and integrate LLMs into products. That pretty much is an off-the-shelf solution for that. Because there's a lot of things that people forget, right? That the amount of downtime in these APIs is huge. I mean, yeah, our biggest marketing point is the status pages for all of the vendors, right? Because they're always having downtime on stuff, and it's hard to keep this stuff running, and it's hard to keep up with the fluctuating loads, right? So that sort of automatic failover, and everyone keeps putting their bloody credit card number in. Stop it, will you? And then they sort of start saying, yeah, but I love Trump, and then what? We're trying to write software here, and here you are writing these stupid sort of things in there, and then someone from Europe says, but the data's not in Europe, so please do that. So there's a whole heap of problems in getting LLMs integrated into products that are aftermarket sort of operational runtime sort of stuff, and no one was looking at them. But when you try and build a tool like heycasey.io, which does that, you start slamming into these brick walls of objections of, we can't do that because it's got confidential information in it. We can't do that because it's not in Europe. We can't do that because, and you get one client who knows that the LLM vendor is on your credit card and wants to send you bankrupt by using it so much that you just watch the dollar signs tick up. Some sort of cost control sort of stuff, and that's sort of llmasaservice.io. So yeah, that's my journey of it anyway. I'm still going through counseling though.
So what you're saying is AI doesn't reduce complexity.
No, it just moves it. It's just like everything. It's Newton's law, just played out everywhere.
Yep. Well, awesome. Well, we'll link both those in the show notes for you, and maybe your website, Focus Objectives, right?
That's the boring one of all the data and the Agile is dead stuff. But I mean, it's still as relevant as ever. It's just I think AI solves some problems and creates new ones. And we just got to adapt.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll get all that stuff linked. It was great catching up with you again, Troy. And maybe we'll talk to you in the near future.
Okay. No problems. Thank you.
If you found value in today's episode, share this with a friend. Until next time, get agile and stay agile.